I'm your daddy.
I can be smart when it's important.
I'm your daddy. I'm
sorry to the
I'm your daddy.
Welcome to Daddy Dailies, a podcast hosted by Not Your Daddy's Films. On a film set, dailies are sent out after a shoot day so you can see the work in progress. Daddy Dailies are conversations that go behind the scenes so you can see what work went into the process and be better armed to succeed in the industry. Daddy Dailies, hosted by Not Your Daddy's Films.
Welcome back to Daddy Dailies, the podcast where we go behind the scenes with industry professionals and demystify the creative process so you can learn from the folks who have been there and done that. I'm Catherine. I'm one of the founders of Not Your Daddy's Films. Not Your Daddy's Films was so excited when American Cinematheque wanted to partner with us for a very special screening and Q&A. And personally, when I moved to LA in 2013, the Aero Theater was a very special place to me where I found community and a safe space to grow and discover my taste and what I love about films and filmmaking. So having the opportunity to introduce one of my favorite filmmakers, Patty Jenkins, at the Aero felt like a very full circle moment. So without further ado, here is the live Q&A with the incredible director of Monster, Patty Jenkins.
Hi. I'm Catherine Hughes. I'm one of the founding daddies at Not Your Daddy's Films. We're a company committed to educating and elevating female and non-binary artists behind the camera. Not Your Daddy's Films was founded a little over a year ago, and we are so excited to be co-hosting a screening with American Cinematheque for the first time. So crazy. Tonight we are so excited to be screening the 20th anniversary screening of Monster with director Patty Jenkins here with us. So I'd like to introduce a special guest who will be back for Q&A with some of the Monster creative team. It'll be moderated by two of our founders, so please stick around. We're looking forward to discussing her early career as she's paved the way for so many female filmmakers, including many of us in this room tonight. So please welcome Patty Jenkins.
So much. Thank you everyone for being here. I've been so excited for tonight. It was funny when I came in, I've only ever proofed this print when it was first made, and so we came in here and proofed a couple reels, leading up to this, and I became so mesmerized just getting to see it on film for the first time. I hadn't seen the film in 10 years until a couple months ago, and it was such a fun experience to get to go back and revisit it. And particularly after being like so on the Wonder Woman ride for so long, and then it's such a different tone, to come back into like, oh yeah, this other whole part of myself. Because I was actually trying to do a very, not similar to this, but more similar to this tone for the years in between. And so I was also trying to do Wonder Woman the whole time, so it's not like that was a surprise. But anyway, to be away from this tone for so long and then come back and see it, and I had such a great time. I was in such huge admiration of all of the people who I had worked with and the incredible work that they did. And it's so funny to be kind of have your head out of it and see a veneer between you and it where you don't remember. It was funny, I saw it 10 years after I made it, and I was full of criticism of things that I could have done better. And this time I've had the opposite, where I really appreciate, how great it was as a moment and of so many people's work. And so super excited to share it with you guys. I'm so excited that you came to do this, and my friends are here and many of our crew people and, partners in making the film. So enjoy, and I hope it's, not so dark. Bye, thanks.
Hi, I'm Coco.
I'm Carly Tamarin.
We are so excited to introduce Patty Jenkins, a director that is a huge inspiration to us.
Thank you.
As we know, she's directed movies like Monster, Wonder Woman 1984, and iconic series like Arrested Development, Entourage, The Killing, and I Am the Night. She's been nominated for numerous awards, Monster specifically receiving Best First Feature and Best First Screenplay at the Film Independent Spirit Awards, and guided her lead actress Charlize Theron to an Oscar win for her role as Eileen. So, How are you? Thank you for joining us.
I'm great. Thank you. That was so fun to see it that way, and so fun to have so many people join me to see it that way. You know, what a cool thing to get to do. So this is wonderful that we got to do this.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And thank you for bringing your personal print. That was awesome to see.
Super fun to see. Can I ask a quick question? How many people here had not seen it before? Oh my God.
Shame.
Wow. I was so curious about that because it is a film that a lot of people, I don't know, I felt like a lot of people saw it at the time, but then it kind of wasn't even on digital for a little while. We had to really fight to get it back in because it was a strange ownership stuff going on with it. So that's awesome.
Do you want to talk about that process of how to get it to digital? To get it on digital?
No, in my case, I got lucky that somebody figured out to get it on digital, and then I had a deal with Netflix at the time, and I just said, would you guys please get it on here, because it wasn't anywhere. It was like one of those films, and it does happen where you can't find a copy of it anywhere, and so I'm super grateful to everybody. But I think somebody finally figured out to get it up a digital print. But there's so many films that are in danger of disappearing.
Yeah. Do you want to bring up the rest of your team first, or do you want to start?
Yeah, I would love to. So, okay, very excited tonight to have a number of my teammates here who, made this film with me. First and foremost, Brad Wyman, who is, Brad, come up here. He's I'm going to talk about you as you walk. This literally is the person, I wouldn't have a career if I hadn't met this person, because I was at rock bottom trying to make it as a director, and Brad and I were lucky enough to meet each other, and I'm a true crime buff. And I was lucky enough that he was making a series of serial killer films at the moment, trying to get out of the industry. And I said, you should make a movie about Eileen Warnes. And he said, you should. You won't get anything else made. And so he was trying not, yes, you did. That's literally what you said. You said, won't be able to get anything else made, so you might as well go for it. Brad said, okay, well, at this point, just write it. And I wrote it, and I gave it to Brad. And Brad said, I'm going to make this movie. And when everybody that we came up against would say, not this girl, he said, why not this girl? And so I want to introduce Donald Kushner to come up, who's our other producer, who's the person who believed, and I didn't even ask you if you were okay coming up, Donald, so I hope you are. Donald is the person who said, okay, Brad, I believe you. I'm your partner on this, and produced this movie with me. And then a very special person in my life is my sound guy, who Peter Devlin, who joined us on this film and played this wonderful part and has been with me ever since, has done the Wonder Woman movies and every other movie in the world, and Black Panther, and has won Oscars, and he's the greatest. And then to cap it all off, a very special guest of the night, someone who was a huge surprise to me and has become one of my closest friends in my life, but joined me on this movie. I'm going to tell the story where when I wrote Don't Stop Believing into the movie, and I said it has to be this song, and everybody said, it's not going to be this song. You can't afford this song. You'll never get this song. Charlize and I wrote a letter, and we begged, oh, please, would you take a chance? And they said, Steve Perry is a recluse. You'll never find him. He's never licensed this song. We sent him the film. He called us the next day and said, hey, man, I love your film. I'm coming over. I want to introduce Steve Perry.
My goodness, this is old times.
So, and then I have to continue that story the tiniest bit, which is Steve showed up on my soundstage and was like, I love your movie. I've never licensed a song because people wanted to license it for stupid things, and they don't realize this is what I wrote the song about. I wrote it about homeless people that I watched from a window, and that's the spirit of the song, and you guys can have it for almost free. And then Steve proceeded to stay with me every day. Everybody leaves at the end of a movie. And Steve watched me and said, I'm going to help you finish this movie when everybody was gone. And so tons of music here, all kinds of things. Steve was by my side every day for the next 4 or 5 months finishing this movie, went on the tour with the thing, and has been one of my dearest friends and greatest mentors ever since. Woo!
I owe her money for all that right now.
Anyway, so here we are.
That's amazing. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that with us. We actually were going to ask about it, so we're very excited we got that.
So sweet. It feels like such a family.
Mm-hmm. We got so lucky. I mean, it really was this core group of people. We had our adventurous people that we had to deal with, but in general, thanks to our wonderful producers, we ended up having a core group of people who really got the movie made. And we had one of the best sound guys in the country who happened to be in Orlando, so we got him to do our film, and he did things like get in trunks and ride around during those takes because there was no other way to get the sound.
And that first bar scene, that was literally from here to the exit. That's how far it was from my house. So that was one of the great things, locations-wise, in Orlando, very close to home.
Good.
Well, we want to start off asking about the beginning of your career before we dive into Monster. So we want to know, our Not Your Daddy's community is in the process of making all of their first short films. So can you take us back to the experience of making your first short?
Yeah, so let's see. My first shorts were, I went to painting school, and my first love was music. And it's taken me years to kind of figure out the real order of this. My first love was music, then I loved drama, and I loved art. And I knew that's what I was gonna do. But even though I was a huge film buff, it never occurred to me that I could make films. Like, I think being someone in the middle of nowhere and being a woman, it just doesn't occur to you that that's a job that you can do. So I went to school for painting. I said, I guess I'm a fine artist somehow. And as soon as I got to school for painting, I took an experimental film course and I put music to picture, and I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do with my life. And I realized in retrospect, it was music. It was emotion that I was after. I was trying to express emotion, and that was a medium that I could do it in. And finally, something that had like much more than just a single frame or just a song. So I started making short films. I went to my school and I said, I'm going to be a narrative filmmaker. And the guy, it was like a film department made for people to do installations and things at the moment. It wasn't for this kind of thing. So my teacher, a great guy named Bob Breer, said, I don't know how to teach you that at all. And so I went to the school and said, I'd like to be an independent study film student half the time at least. And so I just started making films by myself so badly. And to me, looking back, I'm so grateful that I learned film this way, because I think that you can get kind of, at the age of 17, you can get kind of ruined by like, agents and managers and all this right and wrong. Whereas I was like, okay, I'm gonna act in things by myself. I was a huge Almodovar fan, and he was making very, very small avant-garde films at that time. So I was like, I would film myself, and then I'd wait for one of my friends to come over and then film the other side of the conversation. But I didn't understand the line, so then I would go get to the Steenbeck, and we'd both be facing the same direction, and I was like, it's not gonna work. And so literally I would make short films where I would film shots every day and then go try to edit them in and be like, oh, no, I just flashed the film, I guess, like I learned it all as I went along. But it was a fun way to do it. Tons of films starring me and my friends, just as I could do it, And then I directed a hardcore music video. I directed some this and that, but I became a camera person for 8 years, and I was so busy being a camera person. I always said I was going to do something, but I was never getting a chance to because I was working 6 days a week often. And so once I'd done that until I was 28, the heat was on my back, and I was like, you're not ever going to get out of this cycle. You can't do it. So I went to AFI. So that's when really I started making real short films. I made 4 or 5 short films while I was there. So my advice to people making short films is I can only say what I did. Instead of trying to win awards with short films, which is really hard to do and doesn't often lead to much, I would focus on really becoming a good filmmaker with them. So I chose to do 4 or 5 very different tones. I succeeded and failed at really clear things. It taught me so much about like, that's interesting. And literally the last short film I made was a female superhero short film, which a lot of people didn't know right after, I got Wonder Woman, and they were like, but that had been what I was trying to do as a female superhero thing. But I made some mistakes there that had a definitive effect on how I directed this movie. I was an absolutely different director. And the lesson that I learned was when I made this female superhero short, it had an Almodovar tone. And it was so expensive, and I was so stressed out about making the film that I deferred seeing what I was getting until I was like, I guess that's good. Yeah, no, that's good. We got to move on. And I got in the editing room, and it was not there. It was nowhere near what I had written. And so I said, I'm never doing that again. And when I got on the set with Charlize, I knew what I had written. I knew how that seen how big and powerful that scene could be, or if it could make me cry or whatever. And she and I made a promise, and I was like, we're sitting here until we get that, until it happens right before my eyes. And that's influenced me ever since in my career. You have to, learn how to really get present in the moment and see what you're getting.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, that's great advice. So let's talk about that, the phone scene. I mean, that really felt to us like a directorial masterclass. Can you tell us about how you shaped it? Was anything improvised? Did you have rehearsal before? Like, how did you put it together?
And I don't say this as a compliment to myself. We improvised very little, and we didn't have any rehearsals because we didn't have time. And so I had really killed myself writing the script. I was rewriting at night during the thing, like everything, but it had to be what it was, because we shot the whole thing in 22 days. And so it was a fucking nightmare, And so and not to say that there weren't moments, like great lines, like "fuck you, Leslie." Charlize, that came straight from Charlize, like there was definitely stuff, but it had to be exactly what it was. So I super appreciate that about the phone scene. That's not the scene I would even think of you bringing up, but I like I said, I've watched so much true crime, and I've watched so much prison stuff, and so much 60 Days in, and everything. Like, I watch it all. So that language of like what goes on when you're inside, and how you're being tipped, and how and trying to do that line of both Eileen and Selby. I had so much compassion for both of them, but just seeing how that kind of turns, and like, of course she's going to turn on her, but it's just so heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
What did you do to land your first pitch for Monster, and what did you bring to the first meeting? And for any of you, obviously for the producers who are involved, we want to know when you guys got involved in the process as well.
So I'm going to start it off, and then I would want Brad to answer, so basically Brad and I met at this Kodak Connect program. It was a simple conversation. Brad was trying to get out of doing these movies, so he introduced me to these people who he was like, they'll probably get your movie made. Eileen Wuornos, I will say, had been bugging me for years, because the last scene in the film I had seen on the news. First of all, I had been on a road trip in Florida at the exact same time as these crimes went down in 1989. And there was a man killing hookers and so we were driving around in Florida. We were aware that there was a guy killing hookers. We weren't aware about this until she was caught. But I always had, when she was caught, I was paying extra special attention to it. But I was always saying, why is nobody talking about the fact that there was a guy killing hookers at the same time that she started up? And anyway, I saw the scene where where her girlfriend looked at her and she nodded, and it was so like, what happened here? It was like the end of a tragic opera. And then literally the news would be like, she's a man-hating lesbian. And I was like, wait, what? Like, you can't look at this person and see an animal backed into a corner who's been hooking for 25 years at this point and had a gun the whole time anyway, it bugged me. And even when they would do documentaries about her and things, it was interesting, but it was never really telling, why are people not being able to see this journey into what happened to this woman? And in a way, I love her, and I have so much compassion for her, and I don't say that what she did was okay at all, but it was interesting how in her particular case, unlike a lot of serial killers, she's not a serial killer who had a bloodlust for murder. She was more like guys that go to war. She got turned into a killer. She was a person who to survive, she got turned into a killer. And so that that was sort of the story I told you.
Really, kind of. I mean, you remember these things, though, almost like mythical now. There was Kodak Connect. There were a dozen of us, like a cameraman, a studio exec, a director, agent, and me. And Patty was the last one. It was like speed dating. Every 3 minutes, someone sat down and pitched to you. Patty was the last one. She looks exactly the same, too. Unbelievable. And you sit up when Patty Jenkins is across from you, period. She just, immediately commands, respect. She does. And so you sit up, and she tells me this story about Eileen Wuornos. And then I'm kind of like this, and then she goes, yeah, she's also a lesbian serial killer. You did say that. And I said, you'll get that made. I mean, that was really kind of how we met.
Yeah. And then it was Brad. I mean, it was this person believing in me was really all of it. And then in the funniest way, and I give this advice to young filmmakers all the time, there was a genre that was an easy, low expectation genre that was a good way to get in the door. Oh, lesbian serial killer movie straight to video, sure, you know? And so it was...
And they all thought we were making that.
Oh, no,
they thought they were making Cineskin.
Believe me, it showed up when they started seeing dailies of what Charlize looked like. We had some adventures.
Yeah. They came down there and said, you know, you got to look pretty, Charlize. I think the first person that they really wanted us to use was, who was this wonderful actress? I don't want to say, but she was in all the vampire movies.
Kate Beckinsale?
Yes. Yeah. It's like Patty Turnstrom, Kate Beckinsale and Charlize Theron are really going to have a lot of trouble in a bar. Who's going to believe that? You know?
One of them, you could do one person, and Christina Ricci's beautiful, but I was like, we're not going to do these. We're not going to do these two super tall, Anyway, they obviously had a different expectation. I was so happy that Brad actually did something that changed everything too.
I said if she writes it, I'll make it.
No, you said write it and give it your all. And you kept the carrot dangling a little bit. You did.
I would hope.
But here's the good news. The good news was that meant that for the first time in my career, you were so desperate and calculating to get something made that I was like, no one's going to make this. You know what I would fucking see? And I wrote, I don't think I ever would have had the courage to not be as calculating about like, oh, they're not going to make this kind of thing. I was like, I'm going to write a love story. I'm going to write the story of Eileen Warnes as a love story because that's how I see it. That's what I'm going to write it.
And by the way, very little changed. I mean, there were edits and there's locations and there's, major changes, but nothing changed.
Very little changed from the first script. Very little. Yeah. But I like lived it in that first draft. So it was,
Were you afraid to write your first feature? I assume this was the first.
I don't know. I was so desperate. I don't even remember. I was at the moment where I'd gone to AFI for 2 years. Many people will relate with this. I had taken out loans to do it. I had left my job as a camera person. I knew if I didn't make it soon doing something, I was going to have to go back to doing it. And if you go back now, you're in the loop. Like you're stuck. You're working with a CP. You can't miss their job. It's like it's a thing. And so I was so rock bottom that I'm sure I was scared, but I was also like, this is it. One person's going to read my script. Like one person.
She was a force. She was a gale of wind, I mean, I think when she wrote it, she actually didn't even tell me. She just came by with it. I think this. Even again, you don't know if you've romanticized this, but this is how it played to me. And I said, great, I'll read this. And you said, what are you doing right now? And I said, I was just going out to lunch. You want to go with me? And she goes, no, but if you're going out to lunch, it means you could sit in there and read it. And I did. I mean, I closed the door, she waited outside, and I read it.
That's what you got to do.
Luckily, he was next door. Because the key to life, being producers, is getting the money. And without Donald Kushner, there would have been no financing.
Well, and is it true that you got her personal letters as well? And did that change anything?
So that's a long and interesting story. So when I started writing it, it was about 8 months before she ended up being executed. We didn't know she was going to be executed. So I started writing her. She was Eileen. This was 12 years later, by the way, and she had become schizophrenic at that point, which it was such a fascinating education in schizophrenia because with zero mental health help, she had been a fairly sane person, but with zero mental health help, she couldn't deal with the guilt versus the feeling so guilty but also feeling justified, and so she just developed a third scenario. She was like, it was aliens that made me do. Then I was like, I saw that she was needing to escape, so she would come and go in her I'm the victim. And I was like, I know. And she's like, no, I am a horrible person. I should be executed. And you're like, there was no one there. And I was writing her and saying, it can be both true. Like it can be both. But anyway, she also didn't trust me. She was, I want $5 million. It was, it was all those things. She was Eileen, she wasn't, but that was what was fascinating was I kept writing to her and trying to explain to her, I want to tell a story that tells both. All of these things can be true. I wish you could understand that, And then I was just about to go meet her with Charlize when they announced her execution, and they were trying to make a point that they would execute her in like a few weeks. And so suddenly we decided not to do our meeting with her and let her see the people that she still had in this world. And to my shock, the night before her execution, her best friend Don Botkins went in and sat with her, and she said, give Patty Jenkins all my letters. And so it was like, in the end, this Eileen was still hopeful that someone would tell her story. And those letters, I had already written the script. Those letters were incredible to the performance, first of all, because they were full of little details that were so incredible about, like, she was very proud of her hair. And it was all she had, and she would make a big point that she had naturally blonde hair. And she was like, but I didn't have to dye my hair. I had naturally blonde hair. And so that became a thing that when Charlize is using the hair, you realize when she's under threat, she's immediately fixing her hair, and you understand what you saw on tape so much better the second you're like, oh, that's what's going on. If she's going to wash that hair and take care of that hair. Then there were these other heartbreaking, all kinds of little things, like she always condemned the first murder and said that was a rape, and she always asked about the John who she ended up killing, who was the preacher who was trying to help her. She felt horrible about it. It ruined her life. It was the end of her life, And so it made me very confident that the arc, as I had seen it, was right. She thought she could tell who was a bad guy and who wasn't. There were people that she let go in the middle. There were people that as time went on, she started projecting more and more onto these guys, and she talked about it. So anyway, a lot of that sort of thing came out of the letters.
A bit of a pivot. Let's go into the action space. It's really easy for female action directors like myself. It's easy to feel really alone in such a male-dominated space and just trying to learn, trying to get anything made. Can you share some words of wisdom about your personal approach to directing action?
That's a great question, because I found directing Wonder Woman 1 was a very cool adventure, because so many scenes where it comes down to a lot of male-driven action movies are not necessarily tapping into the same things that motivate women, and so then women are thought to not like action because we're just watching revenge, besting a guy. It's not what turns me on, like besting a person. So I'm like, But with Wonder Woman, all of the motivation was something that I was totally behind. And so it was fascinating and fun to get to direct it, because then I'm saying, I'm directing it like I direct anything. I'm saying, piss me off, and I wanted to make sure that every move Wonder Woman ever made was authentically my response, and here too, where I'm sort of like, make me in it and live it. And so it meant that you're on a slightly different journey of like, how women fight is different, what women fight for is different, what happens. But I really felt good about what we ended up doing. And then I loved how many women were like, I didn't know that I loved action. And I'm like, yeah, we all love action. Who doesn't want to be a hero? Like, we all want to be a hero. We all want to save the day. It's just that women might do it a little bit differently. So I think it's about not trying to mimic what you've seen before, not trying to do it right. It's always an emotional story. There is no such thing as action. There's just story. There's just plot. Whether the person's shooting somebody or the people are falling in love, it's irrelevant. Just follow the story and always make sure it's authentic to you, and always make sure when you're a person doing action that might see things a little bit differently, make sure you're motivating yourself in what's dictating those moves.
Right. Yeah. Here's to that.
I want to ask
Yes.
Steve one question before we go. I want to hear your perspective of what it was like joining us.
Well, I mean, I was in San Francisco at the time when I was living there, and I had pretty much let go of the music business because I'd had the moments of my lifetime, and I thought I was done. And I get this VHS. You guys don't know what that is, but it was a VHS back then. And there's a letter, and it's a letter from Charlize and Patty, and it came through my attorney to check out this scene, which is the skating scene, and requesting to use Don't Stop Believin'. Now, you've got to know that Don't Stop Believin' had, I think, already done amazing peaking, and we have been touring, and we were fortunate that the song had done what it does, and then they sort of sit and simmer a bit. Then came Patty Jenkins, you know, and she loved the song and wanted it for the skating scene, and she had tested it, she said, and I guess the relationship, everybody felt, really started to cohesively come together.
I mean, there was never another one. I wrote it to it beat for beat, like the lines were written right there. I couldn't be budged off of it. I couldn't, it was no other song.
Could I just say, when we had to do playback in Orlando at that rink, and I was thinking to myself, they're never going to be able to use this. Never.
So I watched it, and I just picked up the phone. The letter was so sweet and so endearing, and the scene was absolutely, I think, emotionally speaking to the lyric, because I've always felt that the song has multi-levels of emotional content to it, you know, and so it just spoke to all those levels, that the song really had the potential to be spoken to. And I couldn't say no, except pick the phone and said, "Hey, what's happening?" I said, "Hi, this is Steve Perry." And she says to me, "Who?" Because she was on the dubbing stage mixing. And she said, just a minute. She left the dubbing stage, walked outside. She said, "Now, excuse me." What? I said, "Steve Perry, I saw your VHS. It's great." She said, "Well, where are you?" I said, "Well, I'll be in Los Angeles again. I'm at the dubbing stage." So I went down the dubbing stage and hung out. And I'm sitting with her and Charlize and watching the film and getting so excited about it. And one thing led to another. Patty Jenkins in this film resurged that song in this film, relaunched it to the Real OC, to sporting events. It just relived a new life, which today it still is. And there's only one person, I'm telling you, who really did that. It was Patty Jenkins. True.
That's so special. And then
Be careful, if she believes in you, you're going somewhere.
But yeah, you guys have stayed close ever since. Have you worked together more on?
He comes with me to work all the time, and he does everything. So he's always like, "Well, we can patch that through. I can fix that sound." And people are like, "Oh, that's cool. Okay, that did work." "I'm sorry, is that Steve Perry with you?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's Steve." Sorry, because he doesn't want the commitment of having the job on the thing, but he's so helpful to watching everything. But anyway, honestly, one of my greatest mentors, though, as well, about like handling fame and art and how to stay true to yourself and how to do what you believe in. Steve has been the greatest gift of a friend and guiding me through that.
Well, can I tell you just one more story? How I really got hooked into her enthusiasm and her vision was I was sitting in the dubbing stage when I first came down, and she's sitting there, and she just wants the song for, you know, this section, and something's not going right, and she's having a hard time. And these record execs, nobody who's on this stage right now, by the way, but there was some, film execs were saying, "Patty, it's your first film. We know you just came out of AFI school. It's really great. You just don't know how good it is. It's great." And I see this look on her face like she knows it's just this close. And she doesn't have the money to keep going. And, you know, she reminded me of me when I was her age, which is when you believe in something and you know that the bell isn't ringing yet. She just wanted the bell to goddamn ring in her heart, you know, and she was so close. And so I just told her, I said, when they left the room, I said, "You're right. It's close." Yeah, you're not crazy, because they were trying to convince her that she was blowing it or something. Remember those, you know? And it's like that happens, especially to women. It happens to, like, it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Well, who doesn't worry about things being great, you know? So, especially Patty. So.
That is so inspiring to know how much you pushed to get this story made, and I know especially for our Not Your Daddy's Films community, like that is what we're all trying to do right now. So thank you guys for sharing that. We want to do 2 audience questions, if that's all right. All right, I saw your hand go up first.
Absolutely. I was reading an interview with Charlize where she said, and you kind of touched on it earlier tonight, when the dailies started coming in for making Monsters, she was feeling really insecure because she was getting calls from the producers being like, you don't look your best, and it's hard to think of this now because watching this performance, it's hard to think she was ever insecure about it, but she said she had a call with you at the time and you really pushed back and were like, you have to do this. You're making such a beautiful piece of art, and I wondered if you could talk about that or if you remember that phone call because she said that was so pivotal to her and her work with this movie.
Yeah, that's a great question. It was a funny moment. Now, I saw the film so clearly, and I knew we were going to be going against. I knew that these guys understood it. I knew Brad knew what we were doing. I knew we were Trojan horsing it.
You could separate financiers from producers.
Yes, exactly. So the finance. But we knew we had financiers. We knew that we had financiers who didn't know. And by the way, Brad would even talk about it. Brad was like, these guys are criminals and they'll probably steal all of our money, but you'll get your movie made. And I was like, okay, because that's just how it goes, So we knew we were playing a bit of a game where I was like, but I also knew that no matter what, I felt confident that what I was making was gonna check the box regardless. I'm like, you're gonna sell it to fucking Blockbuster one way or the other with this cast for this little money. Like, it's $1.5 million and you're getting Charlize Theron and Christina Ricci. Like, get off my back a little bit, And so I knew that I was doing something that they didn't quite understand, but I also knew that I could see a long shot that if we could make it to it, it was beyond their wildest dream, which they were never thinking that we could even go to film release, much less get to the Oscars. And I was like, she's incredible. We could make it the whole way if this is what I think we can do. So it was my job to be aiming for the highest possible outcome for the film. They didn't understand what was going on, and so they were confused. And Charlize was stronger than she remembers it. Of course, we both were. She was completely, when I first, because I wrote it for her. And so she was very taken aback when I first got it to her, like, why me? I'm like, I don't know, you're just the one. Like, you're the one who can do this. I know you can do it. So she did take those moments, but I was also like, we're either doing this or we're not doing this. We're not half-assing this. Like, we're not gonna sidestep and you guys look hot and we're telling this story. Like, but that's so wrong. Like, we're just be Eileen. Don't worry about it. Like, we have to do it. And by the way, I remember it sort of in the reverse in a way, because we had made these all kinds of like promises to each other. And then when some of that heat started and they were like, we're going to pull the plug on the movie, or we don't want her to look like this. And I was like, oh, well, talk to Charlize, Yeah. And they would talk to her and she'd be like, what did you say to me? So they were very intimidated, more scared of Charlize than anybody. And I was so lucky that I could hide behind her because to have a star that you're allied with like that, and by the way, I've been lucky enough to have it on the Wonder Womans too, where I'm like, when you're super close with your artist, with your actor, and you both have a shared vision, it gets much harder to whittle it away, And so, yeah, she was she's a very strong person too. So she was feeling insecure, and I was happy that I was able to that's her memory of it. But I remember us both really supporting each other incredibly. Yeah.
Amazing.
She was a great partner.
Well, you guys, unfortunately, that is all the time we have today, but we want to thank you. And thank you guys all so much for being here, for hanging out with our Not Your Daddy's Films community. Thank you, American Cinematheque and this legendary Arrow Theater for having us.
Thank you, Arrow.
Once again, you guys, we're Not Your Daddy's Films. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Good luck with the program.
Thank you.
I'm here to help. Good luck.
Daddy Dailies is presented by Not Your Daddy's Films, a social impact organization dedicated to educating and empowering women and non-binary creatives in TV and film. If you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a positive review. And if you want more Daddy episode insights and links to what we talked about, join us on Patreon/NYD Films. Daddy Dailies is produced in partnership with Robert Bailey and edited by Carly Tamarin, Vika Stubblebine, Claudia Restrepo, and Gracie Strauss. See you next time, Daddy.